Good evening, folks. This is Steve from suburban Chicago, and this is also a voice crying in the desert. I thought I'd like to take the opportunity to discuss a few topics that have happened over the past several months. And there's been a lot of changes. I'm trying to get my computer updated here, and I finally got updated, so I got a little bit of a better background. There's a few topics I wanted to discuss. One is going to be the new movie, The Jesus Revolution, and the other one is going to be about the Ashbury revival that happened several months ago. And it's been a while, and so I want to give my topics on that, and I also want to talk about whether revival can happen in today in this day and age, and whether it's possible in the day and age that we're living in. But before I get into those topics, I wanted to make a comment on my friend James Carter that's got a channel on YouTube called "A Voice Crying in the Desert." And he was talking about walking into church with dirty clothes and about churches not being very accepting. And I agree with him on a lot of those issues. And I think it is important for a lot of the churches out there, a lot of these so-called man-made organizations, they need to be reaching out to their members. But I wanted to say to my friend James Carter and his friend Brian Prenrod, that's got this YouTube channel. If you would like to check it out, it's called "A Voice Crying in the Desert," and it's where Brian the Beard, and it's out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and his James Carter and Brian Prenrod. I would like to say to him that if I would just kind of warn him that if you're going into some of these churches for the first time, I think it's important that you should be casual. But if you're brand new, I wouldn't come into these churches looking totally like a bum or looking like you're totally drunk. Because I went to a church last week and they have actually had like armed security and they look out for people who are really, really weird. And I'm not sure if you just want to come in. I think you should come in casual, just as you always are. You should be open, but I don't think you want to draw attention to yourself, especially if you're in a place that's totally brand new and people don't know you. And sort of like me, if I don't know anybody and I want to make a good first impression, I mean, I usually come casual, but I don't want to draw attention to myself and just be a little weird because I don't want to get kicked out. But I think it's important that if you're going to someplace new and people don't know who you are, I think it's really important to make a good impression and just look a little nice, at least to look a little bit of presentable if you can. If you come into the church and you're drunk or you're a little weird, they might call the cops on you and they might have you arrested. It's the same here as it is in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And so I just want to make sure that you're fair warned. And when you walk into someplace new and people don't know you, it's important that you want to make a very good first impression. And then later on, as you get to know more people there, then maybe you can open up a little more. Because a lot of these churches, a lot of these buildings, they're not equipped to handle people who are drunk, and they're not equipped to people who are handled mentally ill. And if you are drunk or if you have a drinking problem, maybe going to church might not be just for you. Maybe you need a substance abuse program or you need some other sort of help that the churches can't provide. So that's just my best suggestion is if you're going to church, and I understand that there are places that are not going to accept you, and Christians tend to be very judgmental, especially if you're not one of them and you're not on their level. So it's very important that I think it's important, at least for me anyway. I wasn't raised in a Christian home. I was raised in a non-Catholic background where we didn't go to church. So there's a certain way that you have to behave. And if you're walking into an environment where people are coming from that life, they're going to be quite judgmental. They're going to look at you strangely, and they might turn away from you. So it's really important that if you're going to some place new, whether it be a new church or a small church, don't draw attention to yourself. I would say just go in, be yourself, and be the best you can be and just be a little bit presentable. Be yourself. I'm not saying, come in a suit and tie, come in a glitter dress. I just go in there and be yourself. And I would say most of the churches are very welcoming, but there are some that are judgmental. But I would say, don't make yourself look too weird when you walk into these places, especially if they don't know you. And that's kind of the way I am. I'm sort of introverted, especially if it's people I don't know. I tend to be very, very careful when I'm going to some place new, or whether it be in a church. I try not to draw attention to myself. I just try to be on my best behavior. So that would be my best suggestion for you guys out there, or for anybody that is intending to go to a new church. Well, now I want to talk about the other topic, and that's the Jesus Revolution movie. And I've heard a lot of the critics of what they said about it. I've heard there's been good and bad, and I thought I'd like to give you my perspective on the film. I really enjoyed the Jesus Revolution movie. I really liked the movie. I thought it was very, very well made. I thought it typified the time of the 1970s and the hippie movement. It's the story about Greg Laurie from Southern California, who came from a so-called dysfunctional family. And he was part of that movement, and he got together and he met a charismatic preacher named Chuck Smith. And in the very beginning, Chuck Smith was part of a so-called very traditional church. It wasn't a church that allowed people to just come in. You had to wear a suit and you had to wear a tie. It was very traditional, and they didn't allow hippies. But I thought it was a very, very good story. It actually went to #3 on the box office. It's probably something I would probably go see again. I think it was a very good movie. I know that there were some criticisms about Lonnie Frisbee, and I understand all that, and I'm taking that to heart. But it's still, regardless of the so-called the so-called what other critics are saying it good and bad, it still was a very good movie, and it's probably a movie I would probably see again. And I think it related to a lot of people who grew up in that time, and it was a very, very interesting time. And I really enjoyed the movie, and so I probably was something that I wanted to see again. So I recommend that all those who have not seen the Jesus Revolution go out and see it. I think you can probably get it on demand or streaming. I think it was a very, very good movie. My next topic I wanted to talk about was the Ashbury revival. It's the revival that took place in Wilmore, Kentucky, just a few months ago, and I actually liked that they went out there and they did a lot of praying, and I thought the Ashbury revival was very good. I thought that at least that the people are praying. And so my criticisms about it is, while I like the fact that they were praying, and I am all for revival in any way. I'm not saying I'm not saying that I'm saying that what they did I have any problems with it. I'm glad that it was student led. There weren't any so-called TV star preachers that were there to lead the students astray. So I'm very glad with that. And however, it really is easy for a lot of students out there to get hung up on emotion and get their adrenaline all built up on something, and it's easy for sometimes students to be deceived, and even Christians can easily be deceived. And part of that is what I wanted to talk about is, can we have a revival in this day and age with all the stuff that we're dealing with, especially now comparing this revival today to what we dealt with in the 60s with the Jesus Revolution? back in the 60s, we had a counterculture movement. There was a lot of drugs. There was a lot of things that were happening around that time. And one of the things that people don't realize, that in that movie, uh, the one way that Greg Laurie and Chuck Smith reached the hippies is they actually had to go out there in the real world. They didn't do it in the church. They didn't reach the hippies. They went out into Southern California and they looked for people who didn't know Jesus. They brought people in that necessarily didn't go to church. They actually were reaching them out there in the community, not inside the church building. Because at the time of the late 50s or early 60s, most of the churches were very traditional. They played organ music. They didn't like people who smelled. They didn't like people who were dirty. They weren't very open to the hippie culture. And so that's what Greg Laurie and Chuck Smith, Greg Laurie tried to do and convince Chuck Smith. And even Chuck Smith at the time, he wasn't utterly convinced. But it took a little convincing, and eventually he started Calvary Chapel in Southern California. What they decided to do, and despite the fact of the people that were around Chuck Smith who says, "Don't do this, you're going to hurt the church," he went on and he did it, and he created something that was very, very successful. And he actually went out into the communities, and he went out into the beaches, and he brought young people that didn't know who he was, and they were people who were hooked on drugs. They were rebelling against their parents. And it was a very, very different time. We only had one counterculture to deal with, and there were all these other little compartments in there. And no one really knew that we were going to have a Jesus movement, and it was really going to happen the way they thought. But at the time, a lot of the hippies that were out there, and a lot of the people who were protesting the Vietnam War, we also had Vietnam to deal with. There was a lot of people out there there were a lot of parents out there that didn't like what their kids were doing. They didn't like the drug culture. Not saying that we're justifying drugs or what they did, but they didn't like the fact that, I think the kids at the time were just rebelling. They were rebelling against the system. They were protesting against Vietnam, and a lot of them were in the streets and they were in college, man. But at the same time, uh, a lot of them were starting to get tired, and they were starting to get protesting. They were tired of protesting, and they were actually searching for something they weren't finding back home. And that's what Greg Laurie and Chuck Smith were able to do. Were able to reach the young people in a very unique way, and they were very successful in doing that. And they actually saved the country in the late 60s and early 70s. And I'll be the first to admit, they didn't save everybody. I mean, there were some that went astray. There were some that fell away, but there were a lot of people that got saved in the Jesus movement, and there were a lot of people out there that stopped protesting, and there were a lot of people out there that didn't get saved and they went astray. But going back to all of that, comparing that to now, and with the Ashbury revival, I'm not sure that we can act. And I know about a year ago, I had a video called "Can Is Revival Possible?" And at the time there was a guy by the name of Chuck Girard who started the Hondells. He was part of that Jesus movement. He was on Theology Mom talking about whether we can have a revival again. And even he said he wasn't sure that we could have a revival. And here's just my opinion. So the question I have for everybody, can a revival happen today with all of the issues that we're dealing with today? Or is it maybe things are just too different now? Maybe there are people that are so lost and so disconnected that it might be hard to really get something going. And I'll say, to be honest with you, I've actually done a little bit of street ministering and going out on the street to pray for people. And it's not really easy to do that. And there's a lot of people that are very resistant to it or not open to it. And there's a lot of resistance out there. So it's sort of like a mixed bag. So I'm not sure with all the stuff that we're dealing with today, such things as identity politics, cancel culture, secular social justice. Can a revival happen the same way as it happened then in the 70s, or it happened during the Jesus culture revolution? I doubt it that it can happen. And if it's going to happen, it's going to come at it's going to come at a price, and it's going to be something that we're all going to have to pay for. But the only thing we can do right now is that we just have to sit back, kick back, and just let God handle the rest. And in God's time, there will be a revival. And it's not going to be what you're seeing on the TV, or what you're seeing in all these revivals of some of these big name pastors are all over California. I don't think you can recreate the same revival that you had, or at least something out there that is going to make a real difference. And if there is going to be a revival, it is not going to be in some of the churches right now. It's going to be all of us getting together as a community. It is going to be for the churches to start getting out of the buildings. It's going to be going out there and reaching people in their communities, because there's a lot of churches out there that are just doing a lot of things in the building, and they're not doing things out there. And it's going to take a lot of work to get a real revival going, or it's just at least something that's going to have a real significant impact on people and be able to change our country right now, because we're living in very turbulent times and very challenging times, and it's going to take a while for things to stabilize with all the stuff that we're dealing with now. So I just think that we have to sit back, pray. Let's just try to all work together. Let's not fight each other. Let's not start beating up on people or people who have different views. We all have to get together, and we all have to be respectful of other people's views. And that's all you can do. And you just have to sit back, and just everything is going to be up to God, and that's all you can do. So what I'm saying is that the only way we're going to have a true revival is that we're all going to have to get out of our homes. We're going to have to get out of the churches to start reaching the people in the community and going after people that need help. And that's what there's a lot of people out there that are in need. There's a lot of people that are lost, and there's a lot of people that are so lost we might not even be able to reach. But the only thing we can do is we just have to try to just save as many people as we can, and hopefully that it will make a very big difference. It's a different season now, and like Chuck Girard says, it's very different, and we have to just let God do what he's going to do. And I will say this again. I just want to make this very clear. No matter who is running for president right now, whether it be Donald Trump or whether it be Joe Biden, no matter who is president of the United States, no matter who is in control of our government, doesn't really matter. The only way we're going to get our country back is when we return to God, and when you and me going out there start making a difference in our communities. You and me, by making a difference in other people's lives. If we start doing that, all this stuff, all the little problems that we have right now with all the identity politics will start to stabilize. But the only way we're going to start getting a revival going is by getting out of the churches, doing more stuff for our community, and start being a light, a shining light to other people. And so that's how we're going to make change. We're not going to make change by fighting each other, by shooting. It's not going to make much of a difference. So what I'm saying right now is we just have to sit tight, just let God do the rest. And things will turn out for the better. So I just want to continue to pray for my friend James Carter in Indiana and his new friend. I would pray for his broadcast, and for those of you who want to watch a good protest and learn more about the Bible. It's a something on YouTube. It's called A Voice Crying in the Desert. It's starring James Carter and Brian Predron. Also, be sure to check out the Facebook group. It's called A Voice Crying in the Wilderness. So I would suggest you watch his videos. They're very, very good. And my suggestion is don't just listen to him and don't listen to me. I would say that always do your own research, always read your Bible, and don't take what I'm saying as truth. Always do your own research and always make your own decisions. So this is Steve from suburban Chicago. So I will be back very soon with another video. And so this is Steve A from suburban Chicago, and also a voice crying in the desert. And I will talk to you soon in a future video. So I will just bid you a very good afternoon and a good day. Bye-bye.